She accidentally called the cold Mafia boss during an attack. He sent an army to save her. Have you ever wondered what would happen if your finger slipped at the worst possible moment? If the name you accidentally tapped on your phone screen belonged to the most dangerous man in the city? Who are you to him? Answer me. The attacker's fingers dug into Lucia's cheeks, his breath hot against her face as rain washed the blood from her split lip. Before she could answer, 3 black SUVs screeched to a halt at both ends of the alley, headlights cutting through the darkness. Men in dark suits emerged like shadows, moving with military precision. Valerio Ricci sends his regards, one of them said coldly before the night erupted in violence. Later, as the powerful Mafia boss himself stood before her, extending his hand to help her up from the rain-soaked cobblestones, he said words that would change her life forever. Whether you meant to call me or not, I will always answer. And I will always come for you. If you've ever found yourself drawn to someone you know you should fear, hit that like button and subscribe to Lucy Love Stories, where we explore the dangerous territory between attraction and survival. The rain fell in sheets across Milan's cobblestone streets, turning the ancient pathways into glistening rivers under the amber glow of streetlights. Lucia Rossi hurried along the narrow alley, her footsteps echoing against medieval walls as she clutched her coat tighter against the autumn chill. At 27, she had walked this route from the university library to her apartment hundreds of times, but tonight something felt different, a heaviness in the air that went beyond the storm. 3 blocks from home, she first noticed the footsteps behind her. Casual at first, then quickening to match her pace. Her heart stuttered as she glanced back, catching only the shadow of a figure ducking into a doorway. Instinct screamed danger. Lucia increased her pace, rain-soaked papers from her research clutched against her chest, her free hand diving into her bag for her phone. The footsteps multiplied, 2 sets now, then 3, no longer attempting stealth. Her fingers trembled as she pulled out her phone, eyes fixed ahead while she blindly scrolled through recent calls. Look what we found wandering alone, a voice called from behind, deep and amused. The professor's pretty little assistant. Lucia's thumb pressed on a contact, any contact, as she broke into a run. The phone connected just as rough hands grabbed her shoulder, spinning her around to face 3 men, faces partially hidden by hoods, eyes cold with purpose. Please, she gasped, both to her attackers and whoever had answered her call. The phone slipped from her grasp as she was shoved against a wall, her head cracking against ancient stone. Lucia? A voice emanated from the fallen phone, distant yet commanding. Lucia, what's happening? One of the men glanced down, his expression shifting from confidence to confusion as he registered the voice. Who the hell is that? Nobody, Lucia managed, blood trickling from where her lip had split against the wall. Please, just take my bag. The tallest attacker snatched up the phone, squinting at the screen. His face drained of color. Fuck. It's Valerio Ricci. The name hung in the rain-soaked air like a death sentence. The other 2 men froze, exchanging glances of unmistakable fear. Impossible, one whispered. Why would she have Ricci's number? Lucia. The voice from the phone cut through their panic, ice-cold and precise. Are you hurt? Where exactly are you? Before she could answer, the tallest man hurled the phone against the cobblestones, shattering it. We need to go. Now. But Donati said. Donati didn't say anything about her being connected to the Riccis. He grabbed Lucia's face, fingers digging into her cheeks. Who are you to him? Answer me. The question hung unanswered as headlights suddenly flooded the narrow alley, 3 black SUVs screeching to a halt at both ends of the passage. Men in dark suits emerged like shadows, moving with military precision. Viadante, North End, one of them said into a sleek earpiece. We have her. The 3 attackers scattered like startled birds, but they didn't make it 5 steps before being intercepted. Lucia slid down the wall, knees giving way as the adrenaline that had kept her upright drained away. Through blurred vision, she watched her attackers forced to their knees, efficient hands securing them. "Please," one of them begged, "we didn't know she was his." A sharp blow silenced him. A tall figure approached through the rain, his movements unhurried yet purposeful. The men around him parted like water around stone. Valerio Ricci, head of Milan's most powerful family, stopped before her, his expression unreadable as raindrops beaded on his immaculate black coat. "You called me," he said simply, extending a hand to help her up. Lucia stared at the offered hand, confusion washing over her. "I didn't mean to," she whispered. "I was just trying to call anyone." Something flickered across his face, surprise, perhaps, or disappointment. "Yet here I am." As his men loaded her attackers into one of the vehicles, Valerio guided her toward another SUV, his hand steady beneath her elbow. "You need medical attention." "I need to go home," she countered, finding her voice despite the shock. "That's no longer an option." His tone left no room for argument as he opened the car door. "Those men were sent by someone. Until I know who and why, you're coming with me." The interior of the SUV enveloped her in warmth and the scent of expensive leather. As they pulled away from the scene, Lucia finally asked the question that had been burning since her attackers recognized his name. "Who are you, really?" Valerio's gaze remained fixed on the rain-streaked window, his profile sharp against the passing streetlights. "Someone who answers when called. If you're feeling that chill down your spine right now, you're not alone." Drop a comment below if you've ever had a moment where danger and protection came from the same unexpected source. The Ricci estate stood like a fortress on the outskirts of Milan, old money and older stone wrapped in modern security. Lucia sat in a cavernous study, a doctor tending to her injuries while Valerio spoke quietly into a phone across the room. Her mind raced through fragmented memories, trying to piece together how she had ended up here. 3 months ago, she had literally bumped into him at a university fundraiser, her coffee spilling across his undoubtedly expensive suit. He had been surprisingly gracious, even as his security detail tensed around them. "I'm so sorry," she had stammered, mortified as the dark stain spread across what was clearly a bespoke creation. "It's refreshing," he had replied with unexpected warmth, "to meet someone who doesn't approach me with an agenda." They had spoken briefly about her research in Renaissance literature, his knowledge on the subject unexpectedly vast. He had asked for her number, ostensibly to discuss a rare manuscript his family owned. "My family has collected artifacts for generations," he had explained. "Perhaps some might be relevant to your research." He had called exactly once, 2 weeks later, to invite her to examine the manuscript. She had spent an afternoon in this very study, marveling at the priceless document while he worked silently at his desk. When she left, he had simply said, "I'll call you again when I have something else you might find interesting." But he never did. Until tonight, when she had accidentally called him while being attacked. "The doctor says nothing is broken," Valerio said, returning to her side. "You were fortunate." "Fortunate would have been not being attacked at all," she replied, wincing as the doctor applied antiseptic to her temple. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Direct as always. It's refreshing." The doctor finished his work and departed with a respectful nod to Valerio, leaving them alone in the vast room. Silence stretched between them, broken only by the crackling of the fire. "Those men knew who you were," Lucia finally said. "They were terrified when they saw your name on my phone." Valerio moved to a cabinet, pouring amber liquid into 2 crystal glasses. "Most people in Milan know my name. Not the way they did." She accepted the offered drink, their fingers brushing momentarily. "Not with that kind of fear." He settled into the chair opposite her, studying her over the rim of his glass. "What do you think you know about me, Lucia?" I know you're wealthy. I know you have influence. She met his gaze steadily. And after tonight, I know you command men who arrive like an army when you call. And yet you don't seem afraid. Should I be? Valerio leaned forward, elbows on his knees, glass dangling from elegant fingers. My family has controlled certain aspects of Milan's economy for generations. Some of our businesses are entirely legitimate. Others exist in gray areas. You're telling me you're in the Mafia, she translated, the bluntness of her words causing him to blink. I'm telling you that I have enemies. And somehow, tonight, you became caught in the middle. He set his glass down with deliberate care. Those men were sent by the Donati family. They've been trying to move into our territory for months. But why target me? I'm nobody to you. Something shifted in his expression, a momentary softening that vanished so quickly she might have imagined it. They saw us together at the university event. They saw you come here to examine the manuscript. In their world, that would be enough to assume a connection. A connection, she repeated, the implications settling heavily. They thought I was your lover. Or someone under my protection. He stood abruptly, moving to the window. Either way, they miscalculated severely. Lucia watched his reflection in the darkened glass, noting the tension in his shoulders, the controlled fury in his stance. What happens now? Now, he said without turning, we send a message. The weight of those words hung in the air between them. Lucia set her untouched drink aside, suddenly aware of how deep she had fallen into a world she barely understood. And what about me? She asked quietly. What happens to me now? Valerio turned from the window, his expression softening as he looked at her, really looked at her, perhaps for the first time. That depends on what you want, Lucia. I want to go back to my normal life, she said, though even as the words left her mouth, she wondered if that was entirely true. Your normal life ended the moment the Donatis targeted you. He returned to his seat, closer to her this time. They won't stop. Not now. Not after tonight. Because they think I'm important to you. Yes. But I'm not. The words came out more bitter than she'd intended. Valerio's eyes narrowed slightly. Aren't you? Before she could respond, a sharp knock interrupted them. A man entered, tall, scarred, with eyes that had seen too much. He nodded respectfully to Valerio. They're ready to talk, boss. Valerio stood. Prepare a room for Ms. Rossi. She'll be staying with us tonight. I don't need, Lucia began. It wasn't a suggestion. His tone brooked no argument as he followed his man out, pausing only briefly at the door. Try to rest. We'll talk more in the morning. Left alone in the vast study, Lucia felt the full weight of her situation crash down upon her. She was trapped in the home of a man who commanded fear with just his name, caught in a war between rival families who saw her as nothing more than a pawn. And yet there was something in the way Valerio had looked at her, something beyond the cold calculation of a man protecting his interests. Something almost like concern. If you've ever found yourself caught between fear and fascination, hit that like button. Sometimes the most dangerous situations reveal truths about ourselves we never expected to discover. Dawn broke over Milan, pale light filtering through the guest room's heavy curtains. Lucia had slept fitfully, dreams filled with rain-slick cobblestones and shadowed figures. A soft knock at the door roused her fully. A woman entered, carrying a tray of coffee and pastries. The boss asks if you'll join him for breakfast on the terrace in 30 minutes. Fresh clothes are in the wardrobe. Alone again, Lucia explored the wardrobe to find several outfits in exactly her size. The implication that Valerio had learned such details about her was both unsettling and oddly thrilling. Dressed in a simple blue dress that fit perfectly, she made her way through the mansion's labyrinthine corridors to the sun-drenched terrace. Valerio stood at the stone balustrade, gazing out over immaculate gardens. He turned at her approach, his eyes tracking her movement with undisguised appreciation. "You look rested," he observed, pulling out a chair for her at the table. "Appearances can be deceiving." She sat, noting the newspaper beside his plate, headlines screaming about 3 bodies found in the harbor. Her blood chilled. "Is that—" "No," he interrupted, following her gaze. "Your attackers are alive, though perhaps wishing otherwise. They've provided useful information." Relief washed through her, followed immediately by confusion at her own reaction. Should she be relieved that a man who clearly ordered violence regularly had spared these particular men? "The Donatis were testing me," Valerio continued, pouring coffee into her cup. "Seeing how I would respond to a perceived vulnerability. They've received their answer. And what happens to me now?" Lucia asked, the question that had kept her awake most of the night. Valerio's expression softened, the cold calculation giving way to something more human. "That depends on you. I can arrange protection, a new apartment in a secure building. Or—" He hesitated, uncharacteristically uncertain. Or you could stay here with me." The words hung between them, laden with meaning. "Not as someone under my protection, but as someone by my side." Lucia stared at him, coffee forgotten. "You barely know me." "I know enough." His hand moved across the table, not quite touching hers. "I know you're brilliant, passionate about your work. I know you speak your mind regardless of who's listening. I know you accidentally called the most dangerous man in Milan when you were in trouble, and you're sitting across from him now without a trace of fear. That's not a foundation for whatever you're suggesting." "No," he agreed. "But it's a beginning." Morning light caught in his dark eyes, revealing flecks of amber she'd never noticed before. In that moment, Lucia saw beyond the cold exterior to the man beneath, complex, dangerous certainly, but also capable of surprising gentleness. "I need time," she said finally. "This is overwhelming." "Time you shall have." He nodded, withdrawing his hand. "But know this, Lucia Rossi, whether you meant to call me or not, I will always answer. And I will always come for you." The promise settled around her like a cloak, both protection and constraint. As they sat in companionable silence, watching the sun climb higher over Milan, Lucia realized that her life had irrevocably changed the moment her finger had accidentally pressed his name. One mistaken call had connected her to a man who commanded armies with a whisper, whose enemies trembled at the mention of his name. A man who, despite the coldness of his reputation, had looked at her across a breakfast table with warmth that belied his dangerous world. Whatever path she chose now would lead her into uncharted territory, where the boundaries between danger and safety, fear and desire, blurred beyond recognition. But as she met Valerio's gaze over the rim of her coffee cup, she found herself strangely unafraid of what might come next. If you're feeling that tension between what's safe and what's irresistible, drop a comment below. We've all faced moments where our hearts pull us in one direction while our minds warn us of danger. 3 days passed in a strange limbo. Lucia remained at the Ricci estate, ostensibly for her protection, though she suspected Valerio had other motives for keeping her close. By day, she worked remotely on her research, using Valerio's extensive library. By night, they shared meals and conversation that grew increasingly personal. On the 4th morning, as Lucia sat in the garden transcribing notes, Valerio's right-hand man, Marco, approached with a phone. "Professor Bianchi," he said simply, handing her the device. Lucia's stomach dropped as she took the call. Professor Bianchi was her academic advisor, the man whose research grant funded her position at the university. Lucia, the professor's voice was tight with concern. Where have you been? You've missed 2 department meetings and your students are asking questions. I'm sorry, Professor. I've had a personal emergency. Well, there's another emergency now. Dean Moretti wants to see you immediately. Something about your research funding being questioned. Lucia's blood ran cold. Questioned? By whom? I don't know the details. Just come in today if you want to save your position. The call ended, leaving Lucia staring at the phone in shock. Marco watched her with knowing eyes. The Donatis, she whispered. They're going after my career now. Marco nodded once. The boss will want to know. She found Valerio in his study, bent over financial reports. He looked up as she entered, his expression immediately alert to her distress. They're targeting the university, she said without preamble. My research funding, my position, everything I've worked for. Valerio's jaw tightened. I expected this. The Donatis are nothing if not thorough. Expected it? Anger flared suddenly. You knew they would come after my career and you didn't warn me? I was hoping to resolve this before it reached that point. He stood, moving around the desk toward her. Lucia. No. She stepped back. I need to go to the university. Now. I need to fix this. It's not safe. My entire future is at stake. Your life is at stake, he countered, voice rising to match hers. The Donatis aren't playing games. They want to draw me out through you. I am not your responsibility. The words burst from her with unexpected force. I never asked for any of this. One accidental phone call doesn't give you the right to control my life. Valerio went still, his expression unreadable. Is that what you think I'm doing? Controlling you? Aren't you? She gestured around the opulent study. Keeping me here, deciding what's best for me, making choices about my safety without consulting me? I'm trying to protect you. I don't need your protection. I need my life back. The silence between them crackled with tension. Finally, Valerio nodded once, his face settling into the cold mask she'd first seen that rainy night. As you wish. He pressed a button on his desk. Marco will drive you to the university. But my men will be watching from a distance. That is non-negotiable. Lucia wanted to argue further, but the finality in his tone stopped her. This was a compromise, she realized, the most she would get from a man accustomed to absolute control. Fine, she conceded. But they stay out of sight. I need to handle this my way. Your way, Valerio repeated, a hint of something like admiration breaking through his mask. Always your way, isn't it, Lucia? She met his gaze steadily. It's the only way I know. The university campus bustled with midday activity as Marco's sleek black car pulled up to the humanities building. Students lounged on ancient steps, oblivious to the tension radiating from the vehicle. The boss says to call if you need anything, Marco said as she prepared to exit. Anything at all. Lucia nodded, suddenly grateful for the weight of the new phone Valerio had given her. Thank you, Marco. Be careful, Professor, he added, his scarred face softening slightly. The Donatis don't fight fair. The warning followed her up the worn stone steps and through the familiar corridors to Dean Moretti's office. The secretary waved her straight in, eyes widening slightly at the fading bruise on Lucia's temple. Dean Moretti was not alone. A man in an impeccable suit sat across from him, silver-haired, distinguished, with a smile that never reached his cold eyes. He stood as Lucia entered. "Ah, the brilliant Ms. Rossi," he said, extending his hand. "I've heard so much about your work." Salvatore Donati. The name hit her like a physical blow. This was the head of the family that had ordered her attack, the man directly challenging Valerio's control of Milan. And he was here, in her dean's office, smiling as if they were colleagues at an academic conference. "Mr. Donati has made a generous offer to fund our Renaissance Studies program," Dean Moretti explained, oblivious to the undercurrents. "He's particularly interested in your research on merchant families of the period." "How fascinating," Lucia managed, withdrawing her hand from Donati's grip. "Though I wonder why a businessman would take such sudden interest in academic matters." Donati's smile tightened. "I've always believed in giving back to the community. Education is the foundation of society, wouldn't you agree?" "Indeed. Though some foundations are built on blood." The dean coughed uncomfortably. "Ms. Rossi, perhaps we could discuss the specifics of Mr. Donati's proposal. He suggested a significant expansion of your research, with additional funding for travel and assistance." "In exchange for what?" Lucia asked bluntly. "Merely your expertise," Donati replied smoothly. "And perhaps some introductions to other, historical enthusiasts in Milan." The implication was clear. Donati wanted her to lead him to Valerio, to use her as a bridge between the families. The research funding was merely a pretense. "I'm afraid I must decline," she said firmly. "My current grant commitments don't allow for additional projects." Dean Moretti's face fell. "Lucia, this is an extraordinary opportunity. Mr. Donati's donation would secure the department's funding for years. Then I suggest he make it without conditions." She turned to Donati, dropping all pretense. "My research is not for sale, and neither am I." Something dangerous flashed in Donati's eyes. "Everyone has a price, Ms. Rossi. It's simply a matter of finding the right currency." He reached into his jacket, producing a small envelope. "Perhaps this might change your perspective." Inside were photographs, Lucia entering the Ricci estate, sitting with Valerio in the garden, the two of them at breakfast on the terrace. Intimate moments captured by a telephoto lens. "These would make fascinating additions to the University Ethics Committee's files," Donati said softly. "A young researcher involved with a known criminal figure? Such a scandal might make future academic positions difficult to secure. If you've ever been backed into a corner by someone who thought they held all the power, hit that like button. Sometimes our greatest strength comes from refusing to play by their rules." Lucia stared at the photos, ice forming in her veins. Everything she had worked for, her research, her reputation, her future, balanced on a knife's edge. One word from this man could destroy it all. And yet... She carefully returned the photos to the envelope and handed it back to Donati. "Publish them." Both men stared at her in shock. "Excuse me?" Donati recovered first. "Publish them. Send them to the Ethics Committee. Post them online. Do your worst." She straightened her shoulders. "Because I won't be blackmailed, and I won't be used as a pawn in your war with Valerio Ricci." Dean Moretti sputtered, "Lucia, you can't possibly." "I can and I will." She turned to her superior. "Dean Moretti, I've dedicated 5 years to this university. My research is groundbreaking and my teaching record is impeccable. If that's not enough to withstand this man's petty attempts at manipulation, then perhaps this isn't the institution I thought it was." Donati's face hardened, the veneer of civility dropping away. "You're making a grave mistake, Ms. Rossi. The Riccis can't protect you forever. I don't need their protection to recognize a bully. She moved toward the door, pausing with her hand on the knob. My research focuses on how Renaissance merchant families used art and culture to legitimize their power. The truly powerful never needed to resort to threats and coercion. They led through vision and respect. She met his gaze directly. Something to consider, Mr. Donati. The corridor outside seemed to stretch endlessly as Lucia walked away, her heart hammering against her ribs. She had just defied one of the most dangerous men in Milan, gambling her entire future on a principle. Was it bravery or madness? Her phone buzzed in her pocket, a text from Marco, car waiting at south entrance. Boss wants update. Of course Valerio would know something had happened. His men were watching, just as he'd promised. But what would she tell him? That she just escalated his war with the Donatis? That she'd chosen principles over safety? As she pushed through the heavy doors to the south courtyard, Lucia was surprised to find not Marco's car but Valerio himself, leaning against a sleek black Maserati. Students passing by cast admiring glances at both the man and the machine, unaware of who he truly was. You came yourself, she said as she approached. I thought you might need me. His eyes scanned her face, searching for signs of distress. What happened? Salvatore Donati happened. She explained the meeting, the blackmail attempt, her refusal. With each word, Valerio's expression darkened, the muscle in his jaw tightening. You challenged him directly, he said when she finished, his voice dangerously quiet. Do you have any idea how reckless that was? I wasn't going to let him use me against you. Valerio went still, something shifting in his gaze. Against me? You did this for me? No, she corrected, realizing the truth as she spoke it. I did it for me. For who I am. For who I refuse to become. A moment of silence stretched between them, filled with unspoken understanding. Then Valerio did something completely unexpected. He laughed, a genuine sound of delight that transformed his face. Magnificent, he said softly. Absolutely magnificent. Before she could respond, he opened the passenger door of the Maserati. Come. We have much to discuss. Where are we going? Somewhere Donati would never think to look for us. A rare smile touched his lips. Somewhere I haven't been in a very long time. The Maserati wound through Milan's narrow streets, then out into the countryside, climbing into the hills that cradled the city. They drove in comfortable silence, the tension of the morning gradually easing from Lucia's shoulders. Finally, they turned onto a gravel road that led to a modest stone cottage overlooking a vineyard. No security, no opulence, just a simple home with a breathtaking view. What is this place? Lucia asked as they stepped from the car. My mother's home. Valerio's voice held a gentleness she'd never heard before. The only place in my life untouched by the family business. The significance of this revelation wasn't lost on Lucia. He was showing her something precious, something hidden from the world that knew him only as the cold, ruthless head of the Ricci family. Why bring me here? She asked as they walked toward the cottage. Valerio stopped, turning to face her fully. Because you showed me something today, Lucia. Something I'd forgotten existed. What's that? Courage without calculation. His hand rose, hesitating before gently touching her cheek. Do you know how rare that is in my world? How precious. The tenderness in his touch sent warmth cascading through her. For the first time, she allowed herself to acknowledge the attraction that had been building between them, not just physical, but something deeper, a recognition of kindred spirits despite their different worlds. Valerio, she began, uncertain what she wanted to say. I know, he interrupted softly. This is complicated. Dangerous. Perhaps impossible. His thumb traced the outline of her jaw. But I find myself unwilling to let you go. I'm not yours to keep or release, she reminded him, though she made no move to step away from his touch. No, he agreed with a smile. You've made that abundantly clear. And perhaps that's precisely why I... The moment shattered as Valerio's phone rang sharply. His expression transformed instantly as he answered, the tenderness replaced by cold authority. When? He demanded of the caller. How many? A pause. Secure the perimeter. No one moves until I arrive. He ended the call, his face grim. The Donatis have made their move. They've attacked one of my warehouses by the harbor. Because of me, Lucia whispered, the weight of responsibility crashing down. Because I defied him. No. Valerio's voice was firm. This was always coming. Donati has been planning this for months. You were just a convenient opportunity. What will you do? His eyes met hers, and in them she saw the duality of the man, the gentle soul who brought her to his mother's sanctuary and the ruthless leader who commanded fear throughout Milan. What I must. He took her hands in his. But first, I need to know your choice, Lucia. After today, there's no middle ground. Either you're with me, fully aware of who I am and what that means, or you walk away now. I'll ensure your safety either way, but you must decide. The weight of his words settled around Lucia like a mantle. This was the moment, the crossroads where her life would irrevocably change, regardless of which path she chose. The academic world she had inhabited, with its orderly research and predictable rhythms, seemed suddenly distant. Before her stood a man of contradictions, capable of both terrible violence and surprising tenderness. Before I answer, she said carefully, I need to know something. The manuscript you showed me months ago, was that real? Or was it just an excuse to get close to me? Valerio's expression softened. The manuscript was real. My interest in your research was real. He paused, a rare vulnerability crossing his features. What I didn't anticipate was my interest in you. And if I choose to be with you, what does that mean? Do I become part of your world? Your business? No. His answer was immediate and firm. Your work, your research, your teaching, those remain yours. I would never ask you to compromise who you are. His hands tightened slightly around hers. But you would be connected to me, with all the protection and danger that entails. Lucia took a deep breath, searching his eyes for any hint of deception. She found none, only an intensity that matched the storm building inside her. I choose neither option, she said finally. Valerio's face went carefully blank, but not before she caught a flash of pain in his eyes. I see, he said, releasing her hands and stepping back. I'll arrange for... You didn't let me finish. Lucia closed the distance between them. I choose neither option because I refuse the premise. This isn't about being with you or walking away. It's about creating something new, something that honors both our worlds without surrendering to either. Confusion replaced the pain in his expression. I don't understand. I choose to be with Valerio the man, the one who loves Renaissance literature and brings me to his mother's home. The one who respects my independence even when it terrifies him. She reached up, her palm against his cheek. But I won't be owned or controlled by Valerio the Mafia boss. I won't pretend not to see that part of you, but I won't be defined by it either. For a long moment, he simply stared at her, wonder dawning in his eyes. Then, slowly, he smiled, not the cold, calculated smile of a powerful man, but something genuine and almost boyish. Only you, he said softly, would negotiate terms with a man like me. Someone has to, she replied, matching his smile with her own. The moment hummed between them, perfect in its honesty. Then Valerio's phone buzzed again, pulling them back to reality. Go, she said before he could speak. Handle what you need to handle. I'll be here when you return. You're sure? I'm sure. As his car disappeared down the gravel road, Lucia turned to the small cottage that represented a side of Valerio Ricci the world never saw. She had made her choice, not from fear or infatuation, but from a clear-eyed understanding of both the man and herself. If you've ever had to choose between safety and authenticity, between what's expected and what's true to your heart, leave a comment below. The most powerful decisions are often the ones that defy simple categories. Night had fallen by the time Valerio returned, his face weary but composed as he entered the cottage. Lucia had spent the hours exploring the simple home, finding traces of the boy he must have been in old photographs and worn books. It's over, he said simply, accepting the glass of wine she offered. For now, at least. The Donatis have received my message. He didn't elaborate, and she didn't ask. Some boundaries were necessary, she was learning, places where their worlds would remain separate. And the university? She asked instead. My position? Secure. It seems Dean Moretti received an anonymous donation specifically earmarked for Renaissance studies, with the stipulation that you lead the research. A hint of mischief glinted in his tired eyes. Completely legitimate funds, I assure you. Valerio. Consider it reparation for the trouble my world has caused yours. He set down his glass, moving closer to her. Though I find myself unable to regret the circumstances that brought you into my life. An accidental phone call, she mused, remembering that rainy night that now seemed a lifetime ago. Of all the contacts I could have pressed. Perhaps not so accidental. His hand found hers, fingers intertwining. My mother always believed some connections are written in the stars long before we recognize them. And what do you believe? I believe, he said, drawing her closer, that in a life filled with calculated risks and strategic moves, the most meaningful moment was the one I never planned for. Their lips met in a kiss that felt both inevitable and surprising, gentle at first, then deepening with the intensity of everything they'd experienced together. When they finally parted, Lucia felt as though something fundamental had shifted within her, not a surrender to his world, but an expansion of her own. What happens now? She whispered against his lips. Now, Valerio replied, his arms secure around her, we write our own story, one that belongs neither to the academic halls nor to the shadows of Milan, but solely to us. 3 months later, Lucia stood before a packed lecture hall, concluding her presentation on merchant families of the Renaissance. Her research had flourished with access to previously unknown private collections, including, but not limited to, the Ricci family archives. The true power of these families, she told her rapt audience, lay not in their wealth or their political connections, but in their ability to adapt and evolve. To recognize when old ways must give way to new possibilities. From the back of the hall, Valerio watched with undisguised pride. Their arrangement had settled into something neither of them could have predicted. She maintained her academic career, living primarily in her own apartment near the university, while he continued to manage his family's interests. But 3 or 4 nights a week, they shared their worlds with each other, sometimes at his estate, sometimes at her modest home, and occasionally at the cottage in the hills that had become their sanctuary. The Donatis had retreated, at least temporarily, though both knew the peace was fragile. Milan's underworld continued its complex dance of power and territory, but Valerio had established boundaries that kept Lucia's world separate and protected. What neither had anticipated was how their relationship would change them both. Lucia found herself more confident, more willing to challenge academic orthodoxy, inspired by Valerio's strategic thinking. And Valerio, to the surprise of his lieutenants, had begun shifting more of the family business toward legitimate enterprises, influenced by Lucia's unwavering moral compass. As the lecture concluded and students filed out, Valerio approached the podium where Lucia was gathering her notes. "Professor Rossi," he said formally, though his eyes danced with private meaning. "A fascinating presentation." "Thank you, Mr. Ricci." She matched his public persona with her own professional demeanor. "I'm glad you found it enlightening." A student lingered nearby, clearly gathering courage before approaching. "Professor Rossi? I was wondering if you could recommend additional sources on the connection between art patronage and political legitimacy?" "Of course." Lucia smiled warmly. "In fact, Mr. Ricci here is something of an expert on private Renaissance collections. Perhaps he might offer some insights as well?" The three of them fell into easy conversation about art and power, the student oblivious to the true nature of the man offering such knowledgeable commentary. When the student finally departed, Valerio's hand found the small of Lucia's back, a subtle gesture of intimacy in the public space. "Dinner at the estate tonight?" he asked quietly. "Marco mentioned you left some research materials in the library." "I'd like that." She gathered the last of her papers. "Though I should warn you, I've been invited to present at a conference in Rome next month. 2 weeks away from Milan." Something flickered in his eyes, concern, perhaps, but not the controlling protectiveness she might once have expected. "Rome is beautiful in the spring," he said instead. "Perhaps I could join you for a weekend. There's a private collection at the Vatican I've been meaning to examine." Lucia smiled, recognizing the growth in his response. 6 months ago, he would have insisted on security details and daily check-ins. Now, he understood her need for independence, just as she understood his occasional need to shield her from the darker aspects of his world. "I'd like that," she said simply. As they walked together through the ancient university corridors, Lucia reflected on the strange path that had led them here. One accidental phone call on a rainy night had connected her to a man everyone feared but few truly knew. She had glimpsed both the darkness and the light within him, and rather than choosing one over the other, had accepted the complex whole. In return, he had seen her not as someone to protect or possess, but as an equal whose strength complemented his own. Their worlds remained distinct in many ways, yet increasingly overlapped in others, creating something neither could have imagined alone. Outside, Milan spread before them, bathed in golden afternoon light, the same city where they had both always lived, yet somehow transformed by the new perspective they shared. Valerio's hand found hers as they descended the university steps, a simple gesture that bridged their two worlds. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "in all the chaos of that first night, I never asked you one important question." "What's that?" "Who were you actually trying to call when you accidentally dialed my number?" Lucia laughed, the sound bright in the spring air. "My friend Elena. She lives 3 blocks from where I was attacked." "Ah." He nodded seriously, though his eyes twinkled. "A much more sensible choice than a notorious crime boss." "Much more sensible," she agreed, squeezing his hand. "And yet, somehow, I can't bring myself to regret the mistake." As they reached his car, Valerio paused, turning to face her fully. In the public square, surrounded by students and professors who knew her only as the brilliant Dr. Rossi, he looked at her with an openness that few ever witnessed. "Neither can I," he said softly. "Neither can I. Life rarely follows the paths we expect. Sometimes a wrong turn, a mistaken choice, or even an accidental phone call can lead us to exactly where we're meant to be." Lucia and Valerio's story reminds us that the most meaningful connections often come when we're brave enough to cross the boundaries that separate our worlds, not by surrendering who we are, but by creating something new together. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe to Lucy Love Stories for more tales of unexpected connections and the courage to follow your heart, even when it leads you down dangerous paths. Share in the comments a time when a mistake or accident led you to something, or someone, that changed your life. Sometimes our greatest blessings arrive in the most unexpected packages. Until next time, remember that the most powerful choice we can make is to remain true to ourselves, even as we open our hearts to others. This is Lucy, wishing you love and courage on your own journey.